Hello, everybody. Technically good afternoon. Welcome to CoMotion Lab's Fundamentals for Startups. I'm your host, Anson Fatland, Associate Vice Provost for Innovation Strategy and Ventures here at CoMotion. For those of you that, for some reason, don't know, Fundamentals for Startups is our regular lecture series that's open to anyone who's interested in learning about entrepreneurship or building a startup. Each week, we feature experts, and today is no different, from various fields who bring you insights and inspiration and give you the opportunity to ask questions. All sessions are recorded and archived on CoMotion's website. For a full schedule and to register for future events, please visit bit.ly/CoMotion Fundamentals. CoMotion Labs, again, in case you don't know, is a multi-industry incubator hosting early-stage startups from both inside and outside the university community. We are committed to nurturing and enabling startup success through critical infrastructure, training, mentoring, and networking. And we do this without taking any equity or IP. We operate out of 3 locations on the Seattle campus, each with its own industry focus: the life sciences and hardware incubators, which are located in Fluke Hall, and our technology incubator, which is based right here in Startup Hall. If you are a founder looking for something to do and somewhere to thrive, we would love to talk to you. No one noticed that mistake, right? Before I introduce today's speaker, I want to mention that this, sadly, is our last event. In our spring series, we will take a break for the summer, and we will restart again in the fall, but we arguably could say that we saved the best for last. Today, Marius Sierselin is here to present Starting Up Solo, Validating Your Idea Without a Technical Co-Founder. Marius is the managing director of Techstars Seattle. He is a Seattle-based product leader, serial entrepreneur, and advisor with a track record of success. He is an Emmy-winning filmmaker who transitioned to product design, where he designed Groupon's mobile apps that were downloaded over 100 million times. Marius has founded successful B2B and consumer startups and recently served as co-founder and CEO of the VC-backed startup ShareGrid, which was recently acquired by Backstage. ShareGrid is a peer-to-peer rental marketplace where over 150,000 filmmakers and photographers rent out more than $1 billion worth of production equipment. Marius is passionate about marketplaces that drive efficiencies in outdated industries and leveraging technology to lower the barrier of creation such as no-code interfaces and AI creator enablement tools. Marius will take questions at the end of his talk, both in the live event space here and via the YouTube chat. And at this time, I will turn it over to Marius.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, and hope everybody enjoys lunch. Today, I'm going to cover a topic that essentially is one of the #1 reasons that I usually get. I wouldn't even say reason. It's the #1 excuse that typically people give me as to why they haven't started their company or why they haven't tackled the idea that they've always wanted to tackle, which is they don't have a technical co-founder, they don't code, so therefore there's no way they could get started. So this has been like a gripe of mine that I always, whenever somebody poses that question or poses that reason, I get very passionate about, no, you could do it. So I hope this inspires you to get after the idea that you've been thinking for a very long time. So with that, I have the clicker here. Let's get started. So let's play a little bit of a guessing game. What percentage of people in the world do you all think know how to code? 1%? Okay. Anyone else have any guesses? 2%. 2%. You guys are pretty dead on. It's about 0.5% in the entire world, but we spend 6.9 hours online. That's okay. Now imagine that only 0.5% of the world's population could read and write. What would the world be like? Many ideas would never be communicated out. That's the world that we currently live in today. Only a fraction of us could actually collaborate and put ideas into the world, a world that's very highly digital. but many of us can't contribute to that world. So I hope that this talk inspires you, and I'm going to share a story of how I overcame that challenge to be able to get my idea into the world, and I hope that this inspires you to do the same, even if you don't code yourself. So I'll tell you a little bit about my background and my story. So 7 years ago, I had way less hair. Let's just point that out. I started a company called ShareGrid. We raised venture capital. We ended up building one of the largest audio and video rental marketplaces in the world. And eventually it was acquired by an industry leader. And we did all of that without ever hiring a CTO. Actually, my past is kind of non-technical to begin with. I started off as a filmmaker. I went to film school, and then through a lot of YouTube watching, I learned how to design websites and mobile apps, and eventually landed a job at Groupon where I helped design their mobile apps, their iOS and Android apps. But it was a lot of, again, self-learning through my own materials. Never went to school for it either. And that's where I met my co-founder, Arash, and he was also a designer on the Groupon team. He had a photography background, I had a filmmaking background, and that's when we came up with the vision of ShareGrid, which was a marketplace where if you're a filmmaker and photographer and have equipment that you're not using, you could rent it out to other filmmakers and photographers so they could use it, and then we would handle the transaction and insurance side of things. So we didn't know how to code. We knew the problem. We didn't know how to code. We had no engineering help because we were still starting off, so we couldn't really convince anyone to join us in helping us. And we certainly didn't have any VC money at the time. So we had a few options when that idea came up. We could essentially just give up and just say, sorry, there's nothing I could do. I can't bring this idea into the world. We could learn how to code, but that's like way too hard. I've tried many times, and for some reason my brain just shuts down when I look at a piece of code. We could try to convince an engineer. We tried that. We failed. Or we could pay an engineer, which is essentially what we did. And it's not that like we had a bunch of money. It was kind of the only fast option where we could validate some of our idea. But we had to validate our idea because in order to validate, in order to hire an engineer, we had to put our own skin in the game. We had to pay someone our own money. So we faced the same problem that typically VCs face when looking at a business. Like, should I invest money in this idea? Is this something worth pursuing? And when we were faced with that decision, is this an idea worth pursuing for us to invest money in? We knew that validation became incredibly important. So we knew we had to validate it. So this was our validation attempt. This was the actual website we built in a weekend. It was a simple landing page, just a one-page landing page. It happened so fast that, little sidetrack story, those two people are my friends from film school. Both of their names are Dave, so I thought it was just funny because it was Dave renting from Dave. I never got permission for them to use their photo because I didn't think they would actually get popular. And it started picking up a lot of steam, and then they didn't know what ShareGrid was, and they were complaining to me, there's like this website that's using our photo. And it was actually our website, which was funny. But we coded it, we used Webflow, a no-code platform, to actually build this landing page in a weekend. And then to get traction, we just did a little bit of Facebook ads. We bought some Facebook ads and ran it. And within, I would say like a few weeks, we had about 3,000 signups on the page. And again, this didn't do much. It was just one landing page, and the landing page communicated what the vision was. It was, you're gonna make hundreds of thousands of dollars a month renting out your equipment. It's gonna be fully insured. Essentially, whatever our laundry list, our dream list of features we wanted were on that page, but none of it was built. It was just, if you're interested, sign up for the wait list. We were just trying to see if like others could relate to the idea and if they wanted to join. And what happened after we had thousands of people sign up, that was incredibly exciting. Arash and I were, very, very motivated now that like we had all these people sign up. It wasn't the signups that really motivated though. It was people emailing us lists of equipment, like spreadsheets full of equipment saying, hey, this is a great idea. Can you help me upload this list of equipment? How do I get started? People thought it was real. People thought it was already built, and they just wanted to get started. Getting those emails really, really motivated us to keep going. So this landing page alone essentially was a cascading event that put into motion everything else that happened afterwards. This wait list also is how we found our third co-founder, because one of those 3,000 people that signed up was a cinematographer from Los Angeles, and he was like, he saw that we were based in San Francisco, and he assumed everything was built, and he had the same idea as us, and was like, this is an amazing idea, like, I can't believe you guys already built it, might as well join you since you guys already started. And we were like, sure, come on, because we haven't started, right? So that landing page got us a co-founder. I think if we went to Brent, our third co-founder, and told him about the idea, but didn't have this landing page, we would have had a less likely outcome that he would have joined. The landing page really helped motivate him to join the team. By getting our third co-founder, he was able to put us in touch with our insurance partner, which was one of the biggest missing pieces of our whole business, and I won't get into that, but that third co-founder helped us build that relationship. That insurance partner helped us gain a lot of press because that was the unique missing piece in this rental marketplace, which was everybody's question was, what happens if somebody steals my gear? By having that insurance partner, now press was much easier to get because it was something unique and something worth speaking about. The press got us renters, right? The wait list really got us a lot of supply because people were interested in listing their equipment. The press got us a lot more attention, which got us a lot more renters, which then having, I think we launched to like 4,000 or 5,000 people at the time. Now we had transactions going, right? And it was all because of this wait list. We didn't launch to an empty room, essentially. We had some initial customers that were interested in the idea, and that made us ramen noodle profitable. That is an official term in the VC world. You could eat ramen, but that's about it. That's all you could afford. That also got us 30 to 40% growth month over month, which eventually was enough to convince a VC and ourselves to quit our jobs and pursue this idea. But all of this started with just a landing page, which took no developer at all, right? It was just us putting our idea on paper and sharing it with the world. You don't necessarily need to build out the entire product before you get started. Oh, and lastly, once we got VC funding, we did hire engineers. So I want to talk about the impact of validating your idea. Why is that really important? Because I think this is a common piece of advice that entrepreneurs receive, like make sure you validate your idea, make sure you validate your idea. But why is that important? What will that actually get you? And I think it starts off with, if you validate your idea, a lot of doors start to open, including potentially getting your CTO. Right? Because in most cases, you will need a CTO at some point. And this is not a talk, trying to encourage you not to have engineers or not to have a CTO. All I'm trying to get across is you don't need one to get started. And getting started doesn't necessarily mean you need code. But in most cases, depending on your idea, you will need a CTO. You will need a technical person on the team. And it's also a recruiting test. And the reason it's a recruiting test, venture capitalists are looking at your idea of, can this be the next multi-billion-dollar idea? Can this be the next big thing? And part of you as a leader of your startup, one of the most important parts of your job is going to be recruiting. Once you start scaling the team, you're going to spend probably more than half of your time at work recruiting and trying to get people to join the team. And by getting a CTO fairly early on, or getting an engineer to join your team, you're essentially doing the impossible. You are going out into the world and finding the 0.5%, telling them, hey, you should quit your job, make a lot less money, and join me. And by doing that, you're essentially proving yourself. That is a massive skill to have to be able to attract great talent to your company. So that is a signal to the outside world that you've done it, you've achieved something that's very hard to do, which is attract the skill that's very rare. But I do think you should reimagine recruiting. And the reason you should reimagine recruiting is that when you're going out to get this unicorn engineer that is the only one that could code, and out of many of your peer group, I think they're pretty practical. Most engineers are fairly practical. So just going out there and telling them your idea is probably not enough. By validating your problem, you're proving that it's a real problem. And when you're validating your idea, it doesn't have to be a volume game. I don't think you have to have this pressure of like, I need to get hundreds of thousands of users. I think, it won't really matter if you have 1,000 users or 1,500 users. What we're trying to do is just prove out the hypothesis of your problem. Is this something that people care about? The one thing that I will advise against is do not count on verbal commitments. Just because you're going out and speaking to customers, which you should, and they're agreeing with you saying, yes, that is a problem. I totally agree. If there was a solution, I would totally sign up for it. Your idea is great. The reason verbal commitments don't hold much weight is that people like to be nice to other people. So they're never going to tell you, no, I'm not going to sign up for your service and just walk away. Most of the time they'll say, that's great, keep going. Yes, I'll definitely sign up. But that doesn't hold much weight. So I encourage everybody to go out and get something more substance when it comes to validation. So some of the methods that I've used in the past that I think are great ways to get validations are a wait list, which I've spoken quite a bit about. If you could get pre-orders, that's even better. I mean, look at Elon Musk's truck. It's been 4 years, he still hasn't delivered, but it was a free loan of pre-orders essentially. So it's a great way to validate your ideas if people could actually pay you for your solution before it's even built. Even something as a community group. So you could essentially start a Facebook group, or there's so many platforms you could start a group, because distribution in most ideas is going to be the bottleneck of going to market. So if you could build that community around the problem you're solving, not only are you building a distribution channel, you are also using that as user research essentially. You now have a group of people that are there at your fingertips to be able to ask any questions that you might have and really truly understand the problem. Newsletter subscriptions could also be good. Pilot agreements, and the pilots could be very short. They could say, hey, we're willing to work with you for a week or a month, and it could be even free. But it's still just the action of getting them to agree to a commitment of time is enough validation. Letters of intent could also be a great way. And again, none of this needs to be done through code. It could be door-to-door sales, phones, fax, whatever it is. In the early days, as you could see, our beautiful flyer, we would go out to college campuses, film campuses, and put these up. The trick is always rip a few off to make it look like others were interested. So let's do a little bit of a workshop. Let's say you guys are a developer and I'm pitching you. Hi, Alex, I'm building a marketplace where you can make money renting out your spare bedroom in your apartment to tourists. The opportunity is huge. We could scale this to millions of places. So that's the first version. The second, hi, Alex, I'm building a marketplace where you can make money renting out your spare bedroom in your apartment to tourists. In just 14 days, 200 apartments joined our wait list. Renting each one once a month at $200 a night could generate a service fee of $12,000 in our first month. To me, that's a much more promising pitch, because now this seems more real. Like I could see the value, I could see people committed, and you'd be able to run a test like this with absolutely no code. And I think you would have a higher likelihood of attracting talent to join your team if you were to pitch with a little bit more validation behind your pitch rather than just hopes and dreams. So now I'll switch into where can you get started? What are some of the no-code tools on the market right now that could help you kind of get your idea off the ground today? Most of the tools that I'm listing here have been around for 5 to 10 years at least. They're pretty established tools. And a lot of these I've used myself. So ShareTribe is actually the tool that we used when we launched our marketplace. So going back to ShareGrid, we actually didn't code the entire website at all. We went to ShareTribe, which was essentially an Airbnb clone. It was a service. We downloaded the MIT code-free license code, and then we hired an overseas developer to just adjust things. But we didn't code the entire marketplace because we said, look, a marketplace, the login system and the rental and the payments, all of that is pretty much table stakes. Like, that's not the unique thing about what we're doing. The unique thing was the insurance, and it was the trust factor. So we instead spent 6 months building an insurance platform to add on to an existing peer-to-peer marketplace. But the peer-to-peer marketplace we took as just a free code library. So ShareTribe, not only does it give you the code that you could own yourself, but also they have like a monthly service fee where if you don't want to touch the code at all, you could just use their platform to like customize your marketplace, change the branding, and just use it as is. So it's a great platform, and they've been around for a very long time, very supportive. If you guys want an intro to the founder, happy to make that happen if you guys are really, really curious about that platform. Adalo is a place where you could build mobile apps with absolutely no code. They're also moving super fast, always releasing new features. So if you are looking to get a native app on the platform, it's not quite native, but it looks native. That's all that matters. I would definitely recommend Adalo. Webflow, I'm sure most of you might know about it. Very popular platform. I would caution you, you probably won't be able to build your entire app, meaning login, backend, all of like that type of functionality, but it's an amazing platform for marketing websites. So if you are trying to have a really nice marketing website and change it all the time, Webflow is a really great platform. And then my favorite one is Bubble, which is full stack, build anything you could dream of. I have not seen any limitations personally that I've encountered, but if you have an idea, especially in the early days, potentially when you're scaling to like hundreds of thousands, millions of users, you might run into some issues, but in the early days, anything you could think of, you could essentially build. I would really, really encourage you. Plus, my next point is, how do you, I did not have that slide. How do you evaluate which platform to get started on? And I have a little trick that I use whenever I encounter a new tool. I always start off not at the landing page of the tool. I go to the forums and I see how active people are in the forums. And then I search YouTube and I look for tutorials. And if there's barely any results on that tool for tutorials, I just don't use it. I don't even try, because most likely I will run into issues. I will get stuck. And if the forum is a sleepy little forum that nobody's going to ever answer, and there's no YouTube tutorials, which is how I learn best, then I just don't even bother, because I'm going to get stuck and then just waste weeks of time trying to learn the platform. So whenever you're getting started, I would encourage you to see how active the community is before you kind of dive into learning a whole new platform. But these are, like I mentioned, these tools have been around for a really long time. And I think the no-code tool that's going to rule them all is going to be AI, which obviously everybody knows it's coming, it's on its way. My co-founder, Arash, from my past startup, is now working on something new, and he's not a developer. He dabbles, he's starting to learn code, but over 70% of his code that he's writing is now being generated by ChatGPT. He's constantly asking ChatGPT for different code snippets on how to build features. And that's today. I mean, we're just months into kind of the evolution of AI. I can't imagine how fast this whole category is going to move. So I would really pay attention to all the no-code tools that are going to be available. So one of my favorite saying is enable, everybody, AI is obviously going to enable a huge portion of the population to start coding, which is really exciting. I think the big arguments like AI is going to take all of our jobs away, where none of us are going to work, we're going to have to rely on the government for funding. But again, remember, 0.5% of the world codes right now. Only 0.5% of the world could actually contribute to creating things in the world. And we all live in a digital world. Imagine the possibilities when half of the world is coding. And so many more ideas are coming out, so many more services, so many more products. I'm very optimistic about the future. So that's where I fall on that side of the argument. And I like the saying, AI won't replace you, people leveraging AI will, which I thought was really good. So I encourage you all to move fast and don't let code kind of stop you from getting started, at least. So, any questions?
I was curious, on your last no-code slide, was the size of the logo proportional to like the user base, or did that mean anything?
No, that was just a Google photo I found.
What are your thoughts on Adalo 2.0 and the new responsive capabilities that they have?
I have not played with Adalo 2.0 yet, so I wouldn't be able to really comment on it. But from my exposure to the team when I used to use it, they move super fast and they're super responsive. One of my favorite features in Adalo is being able to hook it up to APIs, and like their whole database structure is really user friendly. I think like most times, no coders really get stuck on database relationships, and I think Adalo did a really good job at like explaining that for someone that doesn't code and doesn't understand the relationships.
When you created your landing page and you put your idea out to the world, how concerned were you that someone else was going to steal your idea? And how do you mitigate that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we had fierce competitors from essentially day one. And this is just kind of, I get that question all the time from entrepreneurs, worrying that, hey, if I put my idea out, if I'm building in public, which is a common trend, is somebody's going to steal my idea. My answer to that is always, when you're building something, you're literally making usually like hundreds of decisions a week, maybe sometimes in a day. And all of those small decisions essentially end up shaping the direction of the product, shaping how the product ends up. For example, if I gave everybody in this room right now the same idea, I gave away my idea, I am pretty certain that every version of that product will look a little bit different. It's not going to be the same. So unless you have like the exact recipe for something that's very chemical and it could be essentially recreated by just following step by step, I don't think you should really worry, because most ideas, they're going to be shaped by whoever is building the company and their backgrounds and how they approach different decisions. So depending on the audience you go for first, depending on which features you prioritize first, like all of those are going to like change the course of your company. In my own experience, We had a competitor that was doing the same exact thing. They decided first to market was more important. We decided we're going to be second to market, but we're going to build an insurance product on top of it. And we went against conventional wisdom, which was get out there really fast, ship really fast. And I agree with that wisdom, but it doesn't apply to every use case. So just by us making same idea, but we made just a slight different decision of focusing on the trust layer a little bit more than all of our competitors. And that exclusive partnership essentially gave us about 3 to 4 years of a head start later on.
When the startup eventually gets some traction and you eventually need to hire developers, like what do you recommend non-technical founders when hiring engineers?
Yeah. So I'll give you my answer for hiring our first engineer to alter the code that we downloaded essentially. And I'll give you my experience for hiring once we got VC funding. So when we first hired our first overseas engineer to help us kind of edit the code, what we did was we hired, I think it was 2 or 3 developers all at once. And then we had them work on a very small piece of code, same exact piece of code. And we, after that test, we knew exactly who we wanted to work with because, again, same idea, very different results based on the person. And the way they communicated, the attention to detail came through, all things that you could ask in an interview. Hey, are you detail-oriented? Yes, definitely, I'm detail-oriented, right? Do you write clean code? Yes, of course. You're never gonna get that unless you actually see the code. So that was my first experience is hiring, and then we did that for almost every position we hired overseas. If it was a copywriter or a marketer, we would give them a test, we'd pay a little bit more, but in the long run, we saved so much money because we didn't have to fire that person 3 months later and start all over. So a little bit more, yeah. The latter part when we got VC funding and started building out a development team, we never put a job posting anywhere. And my thought around that is that the best developers aren't looking for jobs. They're being recruited, right? So what I did is get on LinkedIn and I just cold emailed. And what I did is trying to sell the vision of my company. I would get on the call, get to know them, but then I went to selling mode. Essentially the same pitch I give my VCs was the same pitch that I was giving a developer because I'm essentially selling the same thing. The VC is giving me money, the developer is giving me time, which is very precious when the supply of developers is so small. So I treated it just like I was pitching a VC, but instead I was pitching an engineer.
I had 2 questions. The first one is for the landing page to show metrics or generate traction and have numbers to show VCs. It's a really good way of doing that. But what if your customer is, say, a corporation or a larger company that probably wouldn't necessarily come on the landing page, and you wouldn't have a wait list to show VCs? And my second question is, if, say, you did pass that process where you got enough people to sign up or enough validation for the idea, and you go to a VC and you pitch them your idea, but you're, say, 2 non-technical co-founders, is it more difficult to pitch that? And do they have concerns about the founding team and you guys' ability to deliver on that vision that has been at least partially validated through that landing page technique?
Great question. So I'll tackle both of them, but first off, whenever you're thinking about validating your idea, I want you to not think about the VC. You are the VC because you're investing your time in this idea. And whenever you're picking an idea, you're going to be doing this for 7 to 10 years, most likely. So now just imagine your 20s being dedicated to just one idea. You have one chance to make this a success, and that's a big investment. So whatever you're validating, you need to validate it to yourself. and say, hey, I have this hypothesis. I need to prove that this is worth pursuing. And if you do that, if you could validate to yourself, first off, you will have the confidence now to go out to recruit engineers, to recruit VCs. VCs is just another teammate, essentially, right? So, but to your first question, let's say you're doing a B2B enterprise play, and landing page is not, maybe it's not going to be the best method. Then I would refer you to the other methods that I've posted up there, which is it's probably going to be more of a hands-on type of approach, meaning you're going to find who is, okay, so depending on your problem, you're going to identify who's the person that has that problem, right? And then you're going to go out and try to find that person through LinkedIn or direct email, whatever it is, talk to that person, see if you could convince them to do a letter of intent, a pilot, right? Can you something, right? So it's just same concept, just different method of approaching it. And I think, is it harder, your second question was, is it harder to get in front of a VC when you don't have a technical person on the team? And the answer is yes. It's much harder because you haven't passed the test of a CEO. A CEO, you're supposed to be the most magnetic person in the room, meaning you could recruit, because you won't be building the multi-billion-dollar company. Other people on your team will be building a multi-billion-dollar company. If you can't recruit those people on the team, then that's a sign that you are not good at communicating your vision. You're not good at, showing the world what the future could be like. So it is super critical to have that technical person, not only obviously to make progress on your product and to go faster, but for the second reason, which is proving that you could recruit the best team possible to actually make this happen.
From Evelyn, and you may have already answered part of it. How would you suggest validating healthcare apps where the wait list and pre-order may not apply? Customer discovery, which is sort of what you were talking about, but can you elaborate in regards to healthcare?
So again, I think the short answer is there's various methods. Talk to the customers, get them to sign up for at least a letter of intent, at least be a pilot. But I'll elaborate on that point of, I think when you're selling into B2B or enterprise where there's so many layers of bureaucracy, right? It's much harder than a consumer product where you just put it out on Facebook and everybody comes to you. But getting just one letter of intent is the equivalent of me getting 2,000 signups, right? Because then the checkout value, the value of that contract could be huge, right? So again, it's not a volume game in the beginning. And then second, I think it's just really important when you're an enterprise to understand who are you selling to. Because an enterprise, who's buying might be very different of who will actually use your product. And what I mean by that is if I have a health, CRM, let's say it's a CRM for doctors or CRM for a hospital system, the boss of the hospital might be buying and purchasing that, and they might have a different motivation than the person using it every single day. The person using it every day is I just want to I want to leave by 5 o'clock every day, and I hope this piece of software solves that problem. The person buying it at the top might be, right now I need to have 5 people to manage this customer list, and I need to get it down to 3 so I don't spend so much on overhead. 2 different type of motivations. So you really need to understand who you're selling to, and then that will make it easier to get that letter of intent or that pilot. But it's the same method of proving. Instead of waitlist, it's just a different method of validation.
I have a follow-up to the earlier question on landing page stealing idea. In terms of, did you IP your idea product? And if so, at what stage did you do and why?
We did not have a patent. I'm a true believer of a patent is just a ticket, like Elon Musk, I think, says a patent is a ticket to a lawsuit, and I just don't want to go there. I would rather just focus on my customers and solve their problem as quickly as possible. And if I do that, hopefully I do a better job than all of my competitors. And while they're just copying what I've already done, I'm already focusing on 6 months, 8 months down the road, and they won't know what I'm working on or the problems I'm solving. So, in some cases, sure. I mean, some industries, maybe that's really important, but at least in the industry I was, I'm not very much for that. Even though at Groupon, they were very much about patenting. I have about like 12 patents that I don't even know what they're for. All I know is I got a bonus for each one, so that was great. Yeah.
Yeah, so once you've validated your idea, do you have any advice for getting VC funding? Because, yeah, so I guess like that's kind of the stage I'm in. I don't know if you were in Seattle when you were raising money, but I validated the idea and I'm just trying to I guess.
Yeah. So once you're validating the idea, getting VC funding, right? That is, there's lots of ways to go through that. I'll tell you some of my experience, and I was in Seattle. So when I was fundraising in Seattle, certainly the first way is network, tap your network, get introductions, right? And then be able to speak about the validation. At some point, not all of us have a great network, and I wasn't one of those lucky people that had a really great network that was able to introduce me to a lot of VCs. So what I started doing is actually reaching out. I built a list of investors that I would want to target, and then I mapped the companies they funded. And from that list, I circled the ones that are kind of similar to me but not competing with me. So then I had a short list of companies. Guess what? Cold emailing a founder is much easier than cold emailing a VC. Founders don't get that many cold emails from other founders asking for help. And my ask was, hey, I'm fundraising right now. I noticed you just fundraised. I would love to get your feedback on my pitch deck, right? We'd get on a call, and again, what was I doing? I was selling the vision, just like I was selling the vision to engineers. I was doing my best to sell the vision, and I would say 8 out of 10 times that founder, I was able to excite them enough about the vision, and then they would either say, if you're looking for investors, you should talk to my investor. I just raised from him, right? Or I would just ask, like, hey, I noticed you just fundraised. Do you have any investors you can introduce me to? And that got me a lot of introductions. And eventually that's how we found our lead VC, and that's the way we took. So a little bit, that was my hack for not having a huge network, is cold emailing the founders versus the VCs.
My question is around your co-founders. So from my understanding, both of them were non-technical.
Yep.
Okay. And how did that decision-making work around giving up equity to non-technical co-founders? And then you also previously mentioned it's very difficult to sell yourself in front of VCs without having that technical person on the board. Did you have the developers on board before you went to VCs, or could that still happen afterwards?
Yeah. So I'll split that into 2 questions, which is, first one, how did we split up equity amongst non-technical founders? And then how do we handle raising funding without a technical founder? So splitting up equity because they're non-technical wasn't necessarily like a huge, I guess if there was a technical person versus a non-technical person, we still measured what we thought they would bring to the table and just kind of try to, compensate for that. And we structured the equity in a vesting schedule. So essentially, hey, we're going to give you this much, but you have to be with the company for 4 years to be able to earn all of that. And if it doesn't work out, then we're going to part ways, and then you won't get the entire equity. So that's the way we set up that. And I have plenty of stories on that. You can come after and we could share more on that. Mistakes and stuff I've made. Now, how do we pitch ourselves in front of investors without a technical founder? I think the fact that we had a working marketplace, again, it wasn't built by us. We had an engineer that was kind of modifying it, but we were already making transactions. So we already proved to investors that we've done it. We've built not only a marketplace that's working, but also a brand new insurance product, which that was coded from scratch, right? So what investors are trying to do is they're trying to assess their level of risk, right? And the risk of not having a technical co-founder is that you're going to spin your wheels and never make any progress because you will always be blocked. You know, you'll have a lot of ideas, but you won't be able to actually get them into a working product. But by the point we went out to fundraise, we were already making money and growing 30 to 40% month over month. So that risk was kind of like, you know, people didn't think it was as risky. They saw we were making progress. We already proved it. And it didn't have to be with a technical co-founder. There was other ways. So I think like a lot of people think raising VC money is a checklist. Like I need a technical co-founder. I need to do this, this, and this. No, you're just trying to essentially prove that you're trying to make the proposition less risky for the investor. So how can you de-risk the idea by getting customers that are paying? Now that's not a question mark in the investor's mind anymore. It's like, oh, people want this. Are you making progress fast enough? And it doesn't matter how you make progress, if it's through a technical co-founder or through a no-code tool. As long as you're making progress, that's all that matters. It's kind of like we're back in school. It's like solve this math problem. We don't care how you get there. As long as you get there and you get the right answer, it's okay if you take a different route. So I would focus more on making progress.
At what point should I have a legal contract with customers? Is a verbal commitment in early stages fine or unsafe?
So a verbal commitment, I would definitely not, I would stay away from a verbal commitment. I would want some type of commitment on paper. Again, we want the customer to take an action showing that they're willing to commit time to this idea or commit time to working with you. And just saying yes verbally is just not enough, because a lot of the times we'll just say yes to please the other person, but it's much harder to like have someone sign something. As far as like early customers signing a document, I'm not going to give advice there because I don't know what the circumstance is, what you're building. But like if it's a letter of intent, it's typically non-binding. So you're not holding that customer to like they're gonna pay you. All it is just a promise that if you build something I'm happy with, this is something that I'm interested in, right? But it's a non-binding document most of the time. So I wouldn't put too much weight on getting the perfect legal structure unless you're working in a regulated space and you're working on some idea that it requires that type of like fidelity in the legal side. But for most cases, it's okay if it's a non-legal binding document, just showing that people want to work with you.
So I just heard the other day that Microsoft Research, their budget used to be 90% human capital, 10% compute. And recently it switched to 50-50, where 50 cents on the dollar basically are going towards the human capital and 50% are going towards the compute side. Do you think this like portends like a potential shift in how like a founder should be thinking about how they're allocating their resources and what they should be investing in and buying, or do you think this is just something that's an artifact of a research shop trying to invest in their research engine?
So that one thing I was thinking about the other day was, will investors even be as needed in funding projects? Because the idea with AI is you're going to do more with less. So by that math, you're going to need less funding. But if we go back to 2000, where you would have to stand up your own database and your own storage, it was incredibly expensive to get a company off the ground. Yet we're still raising more funding now than we've ever raised before, where things are cheaper. You hook up Stripe, that's much cheaper, right? You could build on AWS, that's much cheaper. But somehow we're just chasing bigger ideas that just continue to require human creativity, and it continues to require more talent. So I think we just haven't seen the level of ideas, and we just haven't seen, again, I think we're in the dark ages at the moment where only a very few people could actually put their ideas into the world. And we just can't even imagine a world where half of the population is putting ideas into the world and what that's going to require to support. So I'm of the mindset of like, we don't know the jobs that are going to be available in the long run. So I wouldn't necessarily say we're all going to sit around doing nothing. I think there will be a place for us.
One from YouTube. You mentioned LinkedIn. Are there any other resources you could suggest for finding a technical co-founder?
So one practical kind of place to find a technical co-founder would be hackathons. So I've done that in the past with past projects. And the reason hackathons are a really great place to find a technical co-founder is because hackathons I used to go to were startup weekends. So that would be 48-hour events, 2-day events where you would literally sleep and eat together for 48 hours. Well, you wouldn't do much sleeping. You'd be focusing on work most of the time. But that gives you a chance to know the person a little bit more than just meeting up at a coffee shop and asking them, questions about, should we work together? What do you like to do for fun kind of thing. Where you have to build a product in 48 hours and you have to work together and solve challenges, and you're not going to always see eye to eye. How does that play out? That's a great environment, I think, under that level of pressure to get to know someone's working style and if you guys are a fit for each other. So my immediate kind of practical answer is hackathons. But if you're a young person just coming out of college, what my advice would be, and if you have aspirations to someday start your own company, but you don't have a co-founder just yet, I would say take a year or two and work at the most innovative companies that you could think of. Try to get into those places. See where smart people are gravitating towards. Spend some time there, because some of the best founder relationships are built within companies, and then they come out of those companies and they end up working together for a really long time, because a co-founder relationship really is a huge commitment. I mean, Arash and I worked together for almost 10 years now, and we've gone through highs and lows, and I think it's like second or third most common reasons startups fail is because of co-founder conflict. So I'm always very hesitant of people that just meet over coffee, or they just get set up and like within a week they're starting a company together, because you need to spend a little bit more time. You need to make sure you guys are a right fit for each other and you have the right motive. You have similar goals, because that's where it typically starts to deviate, is when one person has different expectations than the other person. It's really hard to figure that out in a short period of time. So try to spend time with people. But hackathons could be a great starting point, and hopefully you could continue working on the idea or meeting up.
I'm curious, how did your skills as a UX designer transfer over to when you were building a company? I was curious about that.
Yeah. So as UX, one of my biggest kind of things I say all the time is show, don't tell. So being a founder or being a CEO of a startup, you're constantly communicating. You're constantly trying to convince people to do something, or getting them to like agree to different things. And as a UX designer, you know, being able to convince someone, you have to show them what you want. And I think my skills in having, before this I was a video editor and a motion graphics designer. So I constantly relied on those skills to communicate to my employees, but also my investors. And I think those skills really helped me in being very clear. For example, we would meet with our investors actually every month, which is a little bit non-conventional. Typically you meet once a quarter. And the other non-conventional thing that I did was I would prepare slides every single month for them with visuals. typically most companies just send an email update with just metrics. I didn't feel that was sufficient for me to clearly communicate what we achieved that month. And those same exact slides, I would, after I updated my investors, I would turn around and show the same exact slides to my team, because I wanted them to be up to date on what we've achieved that month. Because when you're running so fast in a startup, you constantly forget everything you achieved and you're just always stressed about what's next. So it was a great way for us to take a breath and just like visualize what we've achieved that month and then what we're trying to achieve next month. And I really, the feedback I got from our investors is, can you share those slides so we could tell our other companies to do the same thing, because the communication style was much better. And I attribute that a lot to my visual design background.
At what stage did you formalize the company? And my question is, I know your view on patent.
Yeah.
You knew Raj for 10 years. Probably you could have gone further along, focusing on the validation and getting the work done rather than the paperwork with formation. But I would be curious where you landed on that.
Yeah, so formalizing the company as in like corporation setup, yeah. So that wasn't, for us, we didn't formalize the company for like a year and a half into us working on it. Because again, the goal for us in the beginning was, can we prove it to ourselves that this is worth pursuing? Is it worth us putting time into it? So before we go and like legally formalize it, let's just prove it to ourselves. And once we did, then we kind of went forward with technically formalizing. And we took a very different path. We worked on the idea nights and weekends while we worked our day job. Because again, at that point, we didn't have, scaling a company takes a lot of resources and time. Testing and validating is much more, like you could do that on nights and weekends, because you're essentially putting out a test into the world, see if it works, come back and change it. Putting out a test in the world, see if it works, come back and change it. And once we figured out that it does work, then that's when we said, okay, we're quitting our jobs and going full time so we could scale a proven idea that we already knew was working because we had enough evidence. So that's the approach we took. Doesn't always work for everybody, right? People have different lifestyles. They have a lot of responsibilities. They might not be able to work nights and weekends. And at that point, you might need to quit your job from day one, even as you're validating the idea. But that's the approach we took, which comes back to my point. It's like, it doesn't matter how you get there, as long as you get there. So yeah, take the advice with a grain of salt when people say, quit your job and don't do anything else. There's always other paths to get there.
I have one last question. We have time for the last question on YouTube. Given what you've just been talking about in terms of validating your idea, how far along should a company be to be eligible to apply for Techstars Seattle?
That seems like a planted question, but I'll take it. So the short answer is, we'll take companies pretty early on, even if you just have an idea. What we really look at is your background. Like, are you familiar with the space that you're building in? Do you understand your customer? How are you thinking about the idea? So we've taken companies at the idea stage or once they've had some validation. I do want to take the time to tell you all why I think it's important now more than ever to join an accelerator. And it doesn't have to be the Techstars Accelerator. While I would definitely enjoy having you guys apply, I really think it's important to join an accelerator today more than ever before, is that in the history of technology, we typically go through waves, right? We've gone through the computer wave, we've gone through the internet wave, through the mobile wave, and that's usually a huge indicator of the success of a company, because you're essentially riding the wave versus fighting against it. You have a lot of tailwinds when you're riding an innovation wave. And most companies, most large companies are formed at the beginning of that new technology innovation, right? It's typically what gives birth to a lot of these huge unicorn companies. But you only typically have 18 to 24 months to jump on that wave. But with this current wave that we're going through right now, I don't think anyone has 18 to 24 months. The speed that new features are coming out and the speed that innovation is happening, you probably have like 9 to 12 months. I can't tell the future, but you certainly, this wave is moving much faster. And at Techstars, essentially that's what we do, is we help you accelerate your learnings. We surround you with founders and mentors that have made the mistakes you're about to make, and hope that if we could make you aware of the mistakes you're probably going to make, you could avoid some of those and move a lot faster. So I hope you guys decide to apply to Techstars. Applications are open till July 5th. So I hope you apply, and thank you all so much.
I think we have to wrap it up, but I think Marius can probably be found around here somewhere. It was a hell of a last question. That timing was incredible. First, Marius, thank you again for coming and for talking. It was a great talk. It's a great audience, both in the room and online. Lots of questions, good conversation. So thank you. And then before we're done, I also just this is our last fundamentals of the season. I do just want to acknowledge that these programs don't just happen. There's a lot of people that put time and effort into trying to come up with the topics, inviting speakers. There's a lot that happens that most of you don't see, whether you're in the room or online. That's in the back of the room or in the room in the corner off the back of the room. So I want to recognize all of the people that put their time and effort into putting this series on quarter after quarter, year after year. Thank you to all of you behind the scenes for helping us put on a successful program. Thank you all for being here today. It sounds kind of strange to say this on a rainy, cold, early May day, but at some point in time, we hope you all have a great summer. Thank you for joining us throughout the year, and we look forward to seeing you back here in October when we start the series back up again.